2 Kings, Lesson 10. Good King Hezekiah.
Our lesson today is found in 2 Kings 18 through 19 and 2 Chronicles 29 through 32. In this lesson, we will learn about good King Hezekiah of Judah. We will hear about the trouble that King Hezekiah got himself into and how he turned to the Lord for help. Before we start our Bible lesson, let's listen as Hannah talks to her teacher about trouble in her neighborhood.
Hi, teacher. Guess what people are doing in my neighborhood?
I can't imagine, Hannah.
They are putting down sandbags in case the river floods.
Is your house in danger of flooding, Hannah?
No, not my house, but some others down the hill are in danger.
It's good to plan ahead and prepare.
Well, it might be a waste of time because the river may not flood.
Yes, but if it does flood, they will be glad they were prepared.
What is our lesson about today, teacher?
We are going to be talking about a good king for a change.
That will be great to hear about someone who did the right thing.
His name was King Hezekiah, and he prepared ahead of time, just like your neighbors are preparing ahead of time.
Was he worried about a flood too?
No, he was worried about an attack from his enemies.
What did he do to prepare?
Hezekiah fortified the cities of Judah and made their walls higher.
That's kind of like preparing for a flood.
Yes, a flood of enemies. He also had a tunnel dug through the rock so that water would flow from the Gihon springs inside the city walls of Jerusalem.
Why did he need to do that?
If the city of Jerusalem were under siege, they would not be able to go outside the city walls. With water inside the walls, they would be able to get clean, fresh water.
That was really smart thinking.
If you go to Jerusalem today, you can walk through Hezekiah's tunnel. It is an amazing thing to see.
What else did King Hezekiah do?
I'm glad you asked, because we're going to talk about all the things that this good king did.
After King Ahaz, the most wicked of all the kings of Judah, came Hezekiah, the best of the kings of Judah. He listened to the words of the prophet Isaiah and obeyed the commands of the Lord. The northern kingdom of Israel had been carried away into captivity, but the southern kingdom of Judah remained in the land that God had given them. When young Hezekiah became the king of Judah, the kingdom was very weak. For many years it had been ruled by men who did not serve the true God. These rulers had even closed up the temple of the Lord. Hezekiah wanted his people to worship the true God. As soon as Hezekiah became king, he opened the doors of the temple and repaired them. Then he called the priests and Levites to come to the temple. He told them, "My sons, do not be negligent now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him, to serve him, and that you should minister to him and burn incense." Hezekiah did what was right in the sight of the Lord. He remained faithful to the Lord, and he did not turn from following him. When the temple was opened, the idols were taken away, the altar was made holy to the Lord, and once again the daily offerings were made. The Levites lit the lamps that had sat idle for years, and the priests stood before the golden altar offering incense. Once again the people came up to worship in the temple as they had done many years before. The feast of the Passover had not been held for many, many years. When God's house was ready for worship, Hezekiah invited everyone in the land to come to the feast of the Passover. King Hezekiah even sent messengers through the land of Israel to ask the people remaining in Israel to join them in Jerusalem and to keep the feast. At that time, King Hoshea, the last king of Israel, was on the throne. The land was overrun by Assyrians, and the northern kingdom was very weak. Most of the people in Israel, the ones who had not been carried away into captivity, were worshippers of idols and had forgotten the true God. They just laughed at Hezekiah's messengers and made fun of them. They would not come to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of the Passover. But in some places in Israel there were found some people who had listened to the prophets of the Lord, and they came to worship with the men in Judah. Each family roasted a lamb, and with it they ate the unleavened bread, that's bread made without yeast, and they praised the Lord who had led their fathers out of Egypt to the land where they now lived. There was great rejoicing in Jerusalem, for nothing like that was known since the days of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. The priests stood to bless the people, and God heard their voice and was pleased. When all this was completed, the people who had attended went out through all the cities of Judah and destroyed all the articles of idol worship until the very last one was destroyed. Years before, Moses had made a serpent out of brass in the wilderness. This serpent had been brought to Jerusalem and was kept there. The people had been worshiping it as an idol and had been burning incense to it. 2 Kings 18:4 says, "He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden images, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nehushtan." Before Hezekiah came to the throne, the king of Assyria had gained power over Judah. Every year the people had to pay heavy taxes to him. After a few years, Hezekiah thought Judah was strong enough to set his kingdom free from the Assyrian rule. He refused to pay any more taxes and gathered an army together to build the walls of Jerusalem higher and prepare for the attack by Assyria. Even when Hezekiah had his men trained for battle, they were only a handful compared to the mighty Assyrian army. King Sennacherib of Assyria and his army came marching into the land of Judah and took one city after another. On towards Jerusalem they marched. King Hezekiah realized he had made a big mistake. Judah was not strong enough to keep the Assyrians away. King Hezekiah sent word to the king of Assyria that he would not resist the rule of the Assyrians any longer. When the king of Assyria got the message, he thought, "Now is my chance to ruin this little country of Judah." He demanded a heavier tax than ever before. To obtain all the money needed to pay this tax, Hezekiah took all the gold and silver in the temple, all that was in his own palace, and all that he could find among the people in Judah. He sent all of this to King Sennacherib. But even then, Sennacherib was not satisfied. He sent his princes to Jerusalem with this message: "We are going to destroy this city and take you away into another land, a land far away, as we have taken the people of Israel away, and as we have carried captive other people. The gods of other nations have not been able to save those who trusted in them, and your God will not be able to save you. Now give yourselves up to the great king of Assyria, and go willingly to the land where he will send you." How afraid Hezekiah was when he heard this message. What could his little army do against the powerful Assyrians? Hezekiah took the king's letter and went to the temple. He spread the letter before the Lord and prayed. He asked God to help him and his people to get out of their trouble. Then he sent several princes to the prophet Isaiah to find out God's will. Isaiah answered, "The Lord says that the king of Assyria will not enter Jerusalem, nor will he even shoot an arrow against it. He will go back to his country the way he came. There he will be killed, for I will defend this city and save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David." That night the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 soldiers in the camp of the Assyrians. When the people got up the next morning, the camp was full of dead bodies. In fear, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, gathered his troops and hurried back to his own land. Never again did he return to fight against Hezekiah, for God had heard and answered Hezekiah's prayers. God answered Hezekiah's prayer because Hezekiah asked God for help. For years, the people of Judah had not worshipped God in the temple. Hezekiah opened up the temple, and people began worshiping again. We can see two things from this. First, a godly influence can help others in their spiritual walk with God. Hezekiah opened the temple, and people responded by resuming their worship of God. Second, God is ready to restore us when we turn back to Him. God was ready to accept the sacrifices made in the temple, and He was ready to forgive the people for their years of neglect. Hezekiah invited everyone to the feast of the Passover, not just those he thought would attend. Do you ever ask God for help? Do you need to restore your fellowship with God? We need to be more like Hezekiah and invite people to return to the Lord or accept Christ. Not just people we think will respond, but everyone.